Hey everybody, it's Robert Dinan with Luxury Florida Living, all things Florida. And today we're going to be exploring the property management space and what that looks like and some of the major questions investors have in regards to the property management space and using that for long-term and or short-term rentals. So stay tuned. We're here to answer those questions today. Jason Munchau, I'm here with you today. I thank you for coming. You're with Gulf Income Properties.
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming, my friend. You actually manage some of my properties, so thank you for that.
I do.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and Gulf Income Properties and what that looks like in the space you're in here in sunny Florida.
Yeah, so I've been managing properties for the last 10 years. I own a little under a dozen units myself in the residential multifamily realm. It's a few triplexes, a few duplexes.
You know, I love the multifamily space.
Exactly. To me, when I first got into real estate investing, that was my sweet spot. And so how it developed into a property management business was I had my real estate license. I was selling, buying, working with investors, and then I needed property management for my own properties. So I searched for a company that had the same values that I had, and hard to find. What we want is communication, transparency, and integrity when we want someone to take over a large asset for us.
It's some people's, one of their largest assets.
Exactly. Yeah. And so gaining that trust or giving that trust is incredibly difficult for anyone. Not everyone who owns a property, especially an investment property, is a millionaire. A lot of tenants we deal with, they think all of our owners own their properties straight out or flat out, and that the money is not important to them as far as paying rent, but that's not the case.
Right.
A lot of them maybe inherited the property from someone in their family, or they saw a show on HGTV and they're like, oh, you know what? We don't want to put our money in the stock market. We want to buy some investment property.
In real estate, right.
And so they work their W-2 jobs and they have this highly leveraged asset, but they want someone they can trust. And so when I was in a very similar position, and so when I went on that journey to find a property management company to offer those things, guess what? I couldn't find it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it's very, for something that seems so prevalent in the Florida marketplace as far as rentals and people in the short-term and long-term space. I know I always lean towards more long-term rentals depending on where the properties are, but I like long-term over short-term myself. But it seems like there's just a lack of professionalism in the space. And I don't get it because it's needed. I mean, the property management space is something that's totally needed, especially in Florida, I think.
And the thing is, I don't know, before you found us, I don't know how many other property management... Seven. And so on my journey, when I would reach out to the property management companies, it took on average, and I was looking to give my money away in the sense of like, I need a property manager.
Right, of course.
It took over a week on average for the property management companies to get back to me in order to reach out to a customer who wanted the business.
Yeah. Let me clarify the 7 too. So what happened with my space was it seemed like a lot of people were creating the property management companies, creating a great business, selling their property management company. Then the new guy would come in and it just wasn't the same, or didn't know what he was doing, or, bought into something that was just too overwhelming. So I had that 3 different times. So it became 6 different people. So, and you were the 7th. So
that's very common.
Just to clarify, yes, it seems very, very prevalent in the area.
Well, you get someone, say for example, like myself, who gets into the business because they want to offer that appropriate customer service. And once you get to a certain level, which we've had numerous offers already, the larger companies come in there, they see that you have
X amount of
doors, and they say, you know what, rather than going out and having our sales agents attempt to gather these doors, it's much more efficient for us to just buy these smaller companies.
Acquire these smaller them. Yeah, of course. Why not?
That's what you experienced.
Yeah. And, it was not fun.
No, it's not, because not only are you switching companies essentially, but you're in the midst of a company acquiring another, trying to get their systems in place, and therefore, it becomes hectic for both the employees who work at that company, but also the owners and the tenants.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit off that kind of space. When people are looking for property management, why should they use a property management company?
Well, I'll say this. Someone should not use a property management company if they have all day just to wait around to problem solve for their tenants if they have systems in place to ensure that their tenants' needs are met, which include rent collection, repairs, that type of things. But if they don't have that time, those are the people who should use a property management company.
Because it is investment property too.
Exactly.
So you should figure this into the bottom line.
Exactly. And so you would want to use someone who understands that your goal is to make money. Like you said, it's not all about the bottom line, but that's a major portion of it, is making sure there's a return on your investment and making sure that the expertise is there. There's a lot of laws in Florida. There's a lot of statutes in place to not only protect owners, but also to protect the tenants. And so if you're not familiar with all those, you could get yourself into some pretty big legal trouble, whether it's
especially in the contractual beginning, the contractual side of things.
Exactly. When you're creating a lease, in the beginning, you have the lease, but also one of the most litigated parts in the property management area is a security deposit. So often when we take over a property, it's near the end of a life cycle of a lease, and the owners want us to go in there and say, take the whole security deposit, charge them for everything, but that's not always.
And I want $1,000
yeah, on top of that.
Yeah.
Go after them in small claims court, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't always match up what Florida requires.
Right.
There's things called normal wear and tear. You have to have proof that it was, they created the damage, et cetera, et cetera. So people can get themselves in pretty big trouble that way.
Agreed. I mean, so in the property management side too, you're talking about all these different services. What are the typical services that a property management company provides for an investor looking to work with you, a property management company or your property management company?
Sure. And not to give you too much of a long-winded answer, but it's really broken down to two parts. If we offer both long-term and short-term rental property management. And so for the long-term rental property management, it's really two things. It's tenant placement and it's the actual property management side of things. So when we're placing a tenant, which in our opinion is the most important part of the whole property management process, because if you place a good tenant, that will affect everything moving forward. But the same if you place a bad tenant, that will affect everything going forward. You can go from looking at your asset like, oh, it's going to produce X amount of dollars, to now this tenant is refusing to pay rent, they're damaging our property, and you've lost 4 months of rent, you have to do tons of repairs, and that's all money you're never going to get back.
Yeah, right.
It's the most important part. So obviously it starts with great pictures, great syndication. We personally have everything in-house. We have drones, we have Matterport cameras, which are the 3D tours. We don't charge our owners for any of that stuff because we know how important it is. We don't want our owners to say, you know what,
well, that's part of client acquisition.
Exactly.
That's part of the client acquisition side.
Exactly.
Do you see client acquisition becoming harder now in this space? You're seeing less people looking for rentals than they were, say, 3 years ago?
No. In our area, due to several factors, we're seeing a lot of, number one, more single family homes, and it's people who maybe came to Florida, they bought a house, maybe it was during COVID, something along those lines, and they got a great interest rate. They have another job offer somewhere else in the country, or they want to return back to where they moved here from, but they don't want to lose that interest rate. They feel like they got a great deal on their house, and so they want to keep it and rent it out, keep their asset, and make some money and become first-time landlords. Obviously, they're not here, so they can't manage it effectively, and they don't have any history managing rentals, so they look for experts.
Because it's not an easy job. This is not an easy job managing properties.
It's not.
By any means.
Property management, by definition, is problem solving. That's all you're doing on a daily basis from Monday morning when I get up.
Problem management.
That's a great,
Yes.
I might steal that, by the
Yes.
way. It's problem management, because that's really what it is. And again, typically no one's coming in a malicious manner. It's just people who living
patent pending, trademarked by Robert Downey.
But it's people, who are living their lives. And of course, if you're living your life, you view if your oven is not getting to fully 345 degrees or whatever an oven should get to, you view that as a big deal. And so everyone is viewing their problems as a.
And it's the only one that's being brought to you today.
Exactly. And so also, if you ever want to get into the property management field, prioritization, that's another great skill that you have to have.
Of course. So, typically people they're, like you said, they're investors. Or they own their property, or they're going somewhere else and they want to keep that investment. So typically, what does a person look at when they're looking at property management as a cost? What does it cost someone to do property management or have property management on, let's break it into two parts, the long-term and the short-term. So on the long-term side, what's the cost for a property management? When I say long-term, you're a more lease.
Gotcha. So in terms of base fees, and I'm going to attack this from several different ways for you.
Sure.
But in terms of base fees, on average, you're looking at between 8 and 12% commission based on rent collected. So in theory, if a property manager doesn't collect any rent, it's standard for them not to make any money as well. So, but if they collect what's in their lease, what's due by the tenant, they collect 10%, 12%, 8% of whatever that is. A lot of property managers have additional fees, and this could include lease creation fee. It could be a technology fee. So definitely when you're looking at different property managers, you want to make sure you're reading the fine print, because someone could offer you, we offer a flat fee of $99, but then they offer, it's actually 20% because it's a bunch of additional fees on top of that.
Right.
And then, so that's just the management side.
Geographically speaking too. I've had some properties up in North Georgia mountains, and it's 30% across the board.
Yeah, no.
30%. You can't even deviate. You can't find anybody that's doing less than 30%.
Well, there's partial reasons for that. And
yes,
so,
of course.
For example,
you got to drive 45 minutes to each place.
That. And let's say in our area, we'll take our properties, for example. The average rent on our properties is roughly $2,400, which is good, which is really good.
That's a longer term.
That's a long-term rent, yes, of course.
Monthly rent.
And so we have a lot that are above that, or on average, like we have...
So when you say average 2,400?
2,400.
2,400. So what am I looking at as an investor if I have 2,400 a month? What kind of home? Single family home?
Single family home.
2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom.
Location matters as well, for the fact that if you're in, let's say, somewhere in a good area in Sarasota, you can have that 3-2 home and it'll rent for double that. Versus if you're in a parish, Florida, it could be the 2,400 or even less of what we talked about. And so there's also cycles in the market, not to get too in depth here, but sometimes, like we're in the dip typically in the year right now when we get towards the holidays, where things rent out a little bit slower. There's more properties on the market due to that reason. So prices drop a little bit as well. But like you were kind of alluding to, there's a lot of factors that lead to what a property will rent out for, and its rentability. Like, for example, let's say we have that a 3-2 right next to another 3-2, but one has a pool. Not only is the rent going to be a little bit higher, but it's going to be a lot more desirable to renters in the area, because that's why a lot of people come to Florida, is for that Florida lifestyle.
Of course, of course. So are you seeing a lot more people do the longer term rentals over the short term? Especially now? That whole Airbnb craze is still here. The people who jumped in, like you mentioned earlier, saw a video, and now they're an Airbnb expert investing in the rental space. I think we're seeing them exit because of things that they thought they could property manage it too.
It's tough.
And they're not filling their spaces either. So, leverage to the hilt.
Yeah.
And can't pay that. And now I think we're going to see a lot of those homes come back onto the marketplace. And, maybe not in the rental space, but in the sale space.
Yeah.
Or resale space.
The difference between short-term and long-term rentals is vast. And I'll start by saying all of my owned properties are long-term rentals.
Personal properties.
Right. And the reason for that is everyone has to look at their own risk profile. But I would say, do you like risk or do you not like risk? And I have this conversation with a lot of my owners, because this is a question I get all the time. Jason, should I make it a short-term rental? Should I make it a long-term rental?
Right.
And my answer is always the same. I never tell them make it a short-term rental or a long-term rental. I tell them the pros and cons of both. And if you like stability, if you like a little bit more security, go for the long-term rental. If you're wanting, let me say this, a little bit more income, the possibility of more income, I want to put that disclaimer out there, go with the short-term rental. But again, the short-term rental requires more work. There's typically a larger management fee. We charge roughly 20% for our short-term rentals because it does require more
But in
work.
a short-term rental too, you're looking more beachfront, closer to the beach, closer to amenities, closer to theme parks, closer to things on the short-term rental than you are in just a typical neighborhood like a Southgate, Florida.
Exactly.
Close to downtown Sarasota, but you're looking, that would tend, and plus the restrictions in certain counties play a factor into short-term.
I was just about to say that. It depends where your property is. And one thing we see a lot also is someone coming with a home in Southgate saying they want to make it a vacation rental. And if that's what they want to do, we'll try to help them. But we try to educate them as well as, someone looking for a vacation rental, if they're on an Airbnb, a VRBO, a Booking.com, they're not going to be typically looking for that area. Like you said, they want to be near the beach. They want to have access.
They're searching Lido Key. They're searching Siesta Key. They're searching St. Armands. They're searching all those kind of things in the Sarasota area, Boca Grande, Englewood Beach, Manasota Key, right? Those are the things that they're searching for. Or I want to be up in Tampa, right? I want to be next to the stadium or here or there. They're looking for those particular things when they are looking for the Airbnb. So they're not going to search those individual neighborhoods.
Exactly.
And that's a major part of any real estate, right? You're in the marketing business. You're marketing the properties for people to be filled. So that's the main part of the game.
Yeah, and I think in order for people to maximize the return on their properties, that education is the most important thing. And so other than being problem solvers, we are problem managers now.
Right.
Trademarked by Jason. We are educators.
Right.
Because like we've talked about previously, a lot of people get into owning an asset, whether it's they've inherited it, saw it on HGTV, or whatever the reason may be, they don't necessarily know what they're getting into. And so we look at ourselves as a part of a team, and that's the goal.
Right, of course. Also, do you find that there's more risk associated with the short-term rental over
the
long-term?
And so with the short-term rental, you have to look at a few things because it can be affected by a few things. Like, let's say for our area, let's say we have a really bad case of red tide. People are going to cancel their reservations. Let's say on a more of a macro level, something hits the economy. Maybe some new restrictions are put in place, new taxes. Those can all affect people's desire to go on vacation or the ability. Let's even get the ability to go on vacation. Yeah. So if people's pocketbooks are hurting.
Inflation.
I mean, I think I saw a statistic the other day. Debt is skyrocketing. Credit card debt is skyrocketing for the country in general. So, if that's the direction we're heading, people may take less vacations. And so if they take less vacations, short-term rentals won't be booked as much.
All the government checks have dried up too.
Exactly.
The free money is over for now. Now we'll see what happens next. But how do property management companies help that if they're in that short-term space? How do property management companies really help that investor in that short-term marketplace? Because there's a flip over process that goes on here. It's not just
for sure.
I mean, it's like you're in a hotel.
Not to give all our secrets away, but other than property management, other than education, one of the largest parts of running a property management business are your processes. And so short-term rentals, it's incredibly important to have systems and processes in place, whether you self-manage or whether you're hiring a property management company. If those processes aren't in place, you're not going to be successful. And so at Gulf Income Properties, what we do is we have...
because you have a short period of time from the person coming to the next person coming into the spot.
Exactly.
I mean, it could be hours.
Well, but the thing is, if you have your processes in place, you can...
It's seamless.
It's seamless, exactly. You have your
cleaners. That's why you work with a professional like Jason.
Exactly.
Gulf Coast Income Properties.
Gulf Income Properties is where you really want to go.
Gulf Income Properties, excuse me. That's the competition, Gulf Income Properties.
And so you definitely want to make sure those processes are in place for your short-term rentals. And so before you were asking kind of some differentiating factors between long-term and short-term rentals. There is that risk if you don't have your processes in place for short-term rentals. You could have mishaps like places not being cleaned, getting bad reviews,
beds unmade,
correct scheduling errors, that type of thing. And in our area, I'll give you an example of what happened a few weeks ago. We got a lot of rain. And in Florida, when you get a lot of rain, what happens? Some bugs come, like those little worms or maybe a spider. They might come into your property. So we had one of our properties cleaned 4 days before tenant was scheduled to arrive. The rainstorm came, and there was a few bugs in there. And so
I have a bug guy, right? I have a bug guy. My bug guy, he said to me, Rob, I said, I have bugs in the house. He goes, okay. What kind of bugs? I said, well, they're dead. He goes, exactly. So I mean, that's the whole thing about these bug companies. If the bugs are dead, you're okay. But when people come into the properties, like you're saying, and you see dead bugs everywhere, that becomes an issue, especially if you're not from Florida, not knowing these things that go on. So
exactly. Well, you just hit the nail on the head. A lot of our customers who are vacationing in our area, they're not from Florida, so they see a bug and they think it's an unkept place.
Right.
And so that's why we send someone in.
They think it's overrun with, it's an infestation.
Exactly.
subtropical climate that we live in. People don't understand. We are in a subtropical jungle, the jungles and swamps of Florida. Exactly. It really is something else. And I know I lean, like I said, but I do have short term too. But I lean towards the long term. What do you see are some of the pros and cons of the long term rental space? And again, not to give up all your secrets, but for someone who's thinking of should I go short term or should I go long term? Talk about the pros and cons of long term.
Long term, pro stability. You have someone locked into a lease for ideally a minimum of 12 months.
Right.
Technically in Florida, they consider anything over 6 months and 1 day a long-term rental. And before I get back into this, I'll say this as well. For the short term, you got to keep in mind, anything under 6 months, you have a tourist tax associated with that as well that the owners have to pay too. So there are certain things that owners have to watch out for.
Cleaning fee too.
Cleaning fees. There's so many things associated with that. And it's a state and local. Exactly. So back to the long term, you know what you're getting. There's not as large of variables as there is in the short term.
Right.
I'll say this. Short term has its place. There's people who make a lot of money. We manage a good amount of short term rentals, and some people are making large amounts of money through that. So it has its place.
Again, location too.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Our vacation rentals that are meant to be vacation rentals do a lot better than our owners who have it in the middle of the city stating they want vacation rentals. Let's put it that way. But
if I'm next to the golf course and my feet are in the water in 2 minutes.
That's where you want to be for a short-term rental.
Correct.
100%. Back to long-term rentals, not to jump all over the place. The biggest pro is stability. You know exactly what you're getting into. You have a lease up front with all the terms in it. And for property management companies, we'll say for mine, all our leases are made by a law firm. We don't edit or do any of that stuff to our leases because we're not allowed to. So, we make sure all the terms are what the owner wants, but obviously follow Florida law, which is incredibly important.
And it saved us a couple of times too.
Exactly.
On a couple of things between the things that we did together.
Exactly. Because we get into a day where tenants are very litigious. They think they know the law. And so having everything written.
They Googled it.
Or, they have a friend who's a lawyer.
Yes, the friend.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard, you can't do that. My friend's a lawyer and they told me that's not allowed. I can assure you we educate ourselves.
He's a copyright attorney.
Exactly. I have a lawyer in my family too. She just happens to be a patent attorney. So
there you go. Yeah, there you go.
It's one of those things that you want to make sure you're very familiar with all the laws if you're managing a property. Yeah. That being said, biggest pro of a long-term rental, stability. You know what you're getting. You know everything's written out. You have that steady income throughout the whole year, and you can plan. We have systems in place for our company where 120 days out, we reach out to the tenants to see if they want to renew the lease. We start that campaign because we know that will save our owner money, and it'll obviously...
Again, it gives you the stability again, knowing that they're going to stay. And I think with the long-term rental, personally, people tend to get attached to where they live. It's not the short term where you're coming and having a 4-day party and punching holes in the walls and jumping in the pool at 4 a.m. You have the stability of maybe mom and pop or Fred and Ethel from New York coming down and living here. And Fred will take it upon himself to fix that screw to keep that cabinet tight or do something because he takes a little bit of pride in where he lives too. You see that, I feel like, with the long-term rental. And not that we're asking them to do that, but I feel like you just see that when you have people who are living in the longer term space. I mean, am I correct in saying that? Because I'm sure you've seen some horror shows too, but
you are in general. Of course, you get some rentals or some tenants who three kids who got move in and don't care about anything. Right. They just moved out of their mom's house and they treat it as such, but they don't have anyone taking care of them. But in general,
nor are they taught how to take care of it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. But in general, you are exactly right. Most people have a pride of where they live. And so we make sure as a property management company, we upkeep the property so they can feel that. Because if they do, they're going to do those things that you just said. If something's a little loose, they'll take a screwdriver and tighten it up, those type of things. Right. So, there is that pride of, I wouldn't say ownership, obviously, because they don't own the property, but it's where they live.
Right.
100%.
Now, let's talk about choosing a property management company. Also, when you're choosing a property management company, what are, I'm going to rent my property now. What are things I need to know before going after or going to search for a property management company or going into the space to try to figure out what the best direction is for me to go with my property? I approach you and I go, well, I want $5,000 a month for my property because I think that's what it's worth. There's a whole education process that you take people through, but there are a lot of people you're seeing that are first timers in the space that are just,
Yes.
have no real idea of what the property management space looks like? And how do you take people through that process? And when you're choosing a property management company, what should people look out for? Like the signs that you may say, this may not be something 100% with these guys.
So the first thing I'll say to quickly respond to what you said in regards to, if someone comes to you and you're in a meeting with them and you say, I want $5,000 for my property, and they just go, okay, no problem, we'll get it for you. That's a red flag right there. You want them to come with a market analysis. You want them to show what they feel the property can rent for. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in or one of my salespeople have been in where the owners have misconceptions about what their property can rent for, and their expectation is that we will just go along with it. If the property management company that you're meeting with doesn't try to educate you so you can be successful, that's an immediate red flag, and I would not go with that company. Because, again, let's say you're trying to get $5,000, we feel...
Well, you're not in the business of having rentals not rented.
Exactly. We view ourselves as a team member.
Right.
If you tell me, Jason, it's very important for me to make income from this property. By the way, I want $10,000 a month. I know you're not going to get that. And so if I didn't tell you, hey, Robert, you're not going to be successful. It really can only rent out for $3,500. This is why I'm setting you up for failure.
Of course.
And so that's...
It goes back to your original thing, the transparency and honesty of the whole situation.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and as
the core values of your company.
Exactly. And we're here, not to, you just gave us a great compliment saying those are the core values of our company, which it is, but I'm about to say, we're also here to make money as well. If you're successful...
You know what, just for free, buddy?
Well, sometimes it feels like I'm doing it for free.
Problems all day for free.
And so, but the way we have our business set up is we don't make money unless you make money. So our only motivation is to make sure you're making the maximum amount of money possible. So if we know your property is going to sit on the market for an extra 3 months and you're going to lose money, we're going to make sure we're vocal about that. And again, we have some owners who don't necessarily...
I don't care. I want that number. Get me that number.
Exactly.
And it's fair market value though, or a little bit above fair market value. But they just want that number, and you're going to...
Correct.
Here's the offer we're getting now, but...
Correct. I mean, we've had situations where, and again, I have this conversation at least 5 times a week with our owners, with different owners, and it's, okay, let's say they want $3,500, and we say, we think it's going to rent out for $3,200. They just refuse to budge off that $3,500 mark. We get an offer for, let's say, $3,100, and I do the math with them. If you don't rent this property out for another 2-3 months, you're going to lose $12,000 or almost $10,000, if not a little bit more.
Yeah.
But if you do rent it out at this price, according to the number you initially wanted, you're only losing a couple $100s a month.
Right.
And so sometimes that sinks in with people, sometimes it doesn't.
You lost $840 for the year.
Exactly. Yeah. And most investors do think this way, which is incredibly important. Everything is about the numbers. And so one of the reasons why we have income in our company name is because we understand that investment properties, income properties are about the numbers. So we're trained in running the numbers of investment properties with people, explaining what would be the best route to them. And we feel that that's one of the values we add as well. But yeah, it's incredibly important that you get someone who's going to be honest with you. But also, going on to the next step, it's about building a relationship. And so most property management companies, they're obviously run by different people with different personalities. You want to make sure it's a good fit for yourself, because when you use a property manager, you shouldn't just sign the property management agreement, walk away, say, hey, I'll talk to you in a year. You should check up on your property manager. I mean, I'm not saying every day, which I have some owners who try to do, but you should reach out every quarter.
Disclaimer, that's not me. I'm not doing that.
It's not. But you should have some oversight with your property management company. And some of the things we offer for that is, for every one of our properties, we have an online portal where our owners can log into and see exactly what repairs are being done, what tasks are being created, all the financials for their property, what's been paid out.
Let's talk about the financial side when you're talking about that. What are the tax implications when renting these properties? I know you're not a CPA.
Yeah, disclaimer, not a CPA.
Yeah. But what are the tax implications when using a property management company?
Yes.
For your investment property.
So let's start with the short-term rentals, because that has more tax implications than the long-term rentals. Like we kind of alluded to earlier, you have tourist taxes. Any property in Florida that's rented under 6 months and 1 day, has to pay what's called a tourist tax. And it's a two-part tax. It's a state and then a local. And so we serve Manatee and Sarasota County, and they have a tourist tax which differs by 1%, but it's roughly adds up to 11 and 12% of your gross income of the property. And so you want to make sure you're paying that. And we, as a property management company, we withhold that from your payment and pay that for you. So that's a very large thing. And depending on which OTA you use, which is an online travel agency, it could be like Airbnb, VRBO, direct booking, that type of thing, they'll withhold some of that as well. It's like an occupancy tax, those type of things too. So there's several different taxes that you have to be aware of. And this goes in with the long-term rentals as well. You want to make sure at the end of the year, your property management company is providing you with a 1099. And a 1099 will give you, like, this is what I was paid, this separate kind of the different incomes, that type of thing. So you can provide whoever's doing your accounting at the end of the year, whether it's yourself, whether you have a CPA, they have that document right in front of them. If you had to gather all that information yourself, it could be quite time consuming.
Especially with multiple properties. I mean,
exactly.
It's complete insanity.
Exactly.
At tax time, yeah.
Exactly. It's tough. And so that's why, here's another thing when you're looking for a property management company, make sure you're working with one that will offer that at the end of the year, that it gets sent out automatically.
Yeah. I mean, and the withholding of those fees are extremely important, I think.
Incredibly important.
Yeah, extremely important.
I mean, property management companies in general are under the scope of the government in general. We're a hot topic because a lot of people think there's trash fees, like, oh, you have a fee for breathing air and it's added onto your monthly statement as a tenant. So property management companies have a lot to look out for and make sure they're doing it right. So it's important that you're doing all the taxes and everything appropriately.
Right, right. So what are the questions do you typically get as a property management company?
We've talked about a lot of them in the sense of which way should I go, long-term or short-term. They ask about the market, where we are in the sense of, should I even rent out my property? Should I buy or should I sell? That's another very large question that I get. And as a property manager, I always say rent. No, I'm kidding.
Of course. That's why us in the real estate business would say it's probably a good time to sell.
But I mean, the answer I give everyone is what might be right for me might not be right for you.
It has to be specific to the situation,
exactly.
Right? I mean, you talked about people inheriting properties, people getting properties, people moving out of state. I mean, for the individual, it just matters on go back to what you said earlier, what their risk assessment is and what they're willing to take as far as a risk on something and what their tolerance is with that risk, right? If I'm in Canada and I have a house in Sarasota, am I willing to rent that out or should I just sell it if I'm going back to Canada, right? I mean, those are the things that they need to consider. And that's risk tolerance, I think, and finding the right people to do the job too, of course, on the management side.
Exactly, and feeling comfortable. I mean, there's people who have the desire to rent out their property because they're moving for a job or for whatever reason, inheritance, kind of like what you just said. But will they feel comfortable letting someone else control their asset? Because it's a big deal. There's some owners who I love having them as clients.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that.
That was really directed at you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I am a pain in his rear end, by the way.
But the fact of the matter is they have such anxiety about it because it's not in their normal wheelhouse of, letting a $600,000 asset be controlled by someone else. And in essence, you're letting a property manager control your property. Because and here's another,
and letting people into some people, if it was your home and you're renting it, it's your home, right?
Exactly.
And people are like, who's in my house?
Yeah,
right?
and there are flaws in Florida that protect tenants. Which, as there should be.
Yeah, but there's some great new ones that DeSantis has come out with, the squatting law. That's huge. I mean, you can call the police in one day and get people out of your house if they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, well, right? True. But the laws I'm referring to are
like tenant leasing.
Tenant leasing laws. Yeah. And an owner, I've had calls from owners when a tenant is not doing something the owner likes. They said, go in there and kick the door down and drag them out of there.
Oh, yeah, that
and
happens.
That's not what we do at all. I don't think you understand how this works.
Not going to work. Yeah, not going to work.
So, I mean, if you're not comfortable doing that, and sometimes things happen and they don't go as you planned. So, as we talked about earlier, literally, if you're self-managing or going with a property management company, the most important part of management is placing a good tenant, but someone can look very good on paper. You can meet with them and they can present very well. And
at the end of the day, you never really know.
Exactly. It still might not go your way.
No.
So if someone's not comfortable then going through the appropriate course of legal action, an eviction, posting the notices, it's really not for them if they don't have the understanding that that's what has to be done. And again, we make sure we educate all of our owners even after they sign the property.
But you're educating the tenants too.
100%.
I mean, so it's like you're going into this thing double-sided. You're telling them this is what's happening, this is how it works, and these are your rules and regs per se, right? And these are their rules and regulations here, and this is what we're going to do. So you are the middleman, right, between it all. But I would think you probably have a very good ratio with tenants doing the right thing compared to them not doing the right thing, because you have a strict process in getting them into the properties themselves first.
100%. I wouldn't say 100% ratio, but it's
no, but 100% that you do these things prior to putting the people in prior to placing them.
And part of that is education. Long ago, many years ago, prior to getting into real estate, I was a social worker, so I understand that educating people, making sure you're not starting at one end of the spectrum and trying to drag them all the way to where you want them to be is important. It's getting them there very early.
Right.
And so we do that by right at the start of the application process. We send them emails full of packets that have tons of wonderful information. Our website has tons of wonderful information on it. We make sure people go there and, read what's the difference between normal wear and tear and damage. What are the tenant's duties during a hurricane, a named storm, those type of things. We make sure that they have all that information. So when that time comes, it's not a surprise like, oh, geez, I didn't know punching a hole in the wall was considered damage, that type of thing. And we also do a lot of additional things.
I mean, I couldn't remove that wall there. I took that wall down. I couldn't do that. I made 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom. I wasn't allowed to do that.
Yeah, well, and back to your question a few minutes ago, as far as what's important and what does a property management company offer, in terms of those processes, you need to have things set in place. Like if someone wanted to remove a wall or someone wanted to paint the room, you got to have forms. You got to have all that stuff set up so the tenants can get to it easily and make sure you're protecting yourself and your owner. So
at the end of the day, you have to get back to the people who hired you, right?
Exactly. And I mean, we do serve the tenant, but obviously the owners hire us.
Yes.
So that's, I don't want to say more important, but it's just they're different.
Right, indeed.
Tenants are very important. I don't want to make anyone think that.
No, of course not, and that's not what I was trying to say here.
I'm kidding.
But anyway, Jason, I thank you for coming here today. A wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate everything you do with our properties. I thank you so much. It's wonderful. Jason, Gulf Income Properties, fantastic property management here on the west coast of Florida. So, and has his own rentals too. So understands the space more than most. So if you're looking to maybe change a property management company or get into your investment space, this is the guy to talk to. And again, I thank you, Jason, for coming. Robert Dinan, Luxury Florida Living, all things Florida, your Florida Realtor. Have a great day, and we'll see you at our next podcast. Take care.